Well, if you would, let us turn to the lecture on wars of religion. However, before we do that, I want to back up just a little bit and discuss the Jesuit order, because I'm sorry, I have a feeling this is going to be a long, hard day with this mouse. But I do want to kind of return to a question that was asked last week that I couldn't answer, and I'm sure that you knew even before then that your professor does not know it all. Okay, and so I'm a learner just as you are. And so many times as I'm covering broad subjects, sometimes I paint with broad strokes, and sometimes I miss some interesting and even important details. So the question was asked, in what way were the Jesuits patterned after the military? This was part of the notes, and of course we could imagine that the Jesuits or the Society of Jesus would be patterned after the military because their founder, Ignatius of Loyola, had been a soldier and had been wounded in battle, and it was during his recovery that he came to a faith in Christ and a devotion to serving him. And so when he created his order of soldiers for Jesus, well, then it would have been natural for him to pattern it after the military. But interestingly, I looked at a number of sources. I even have a book that covers the Catholic Counter-Reformation. I looked at our textbook by Justo Gonzalez. I did a Google search. And many sources affirmed that the Jesuits were patterned after the military and did not go into any further detail. Very frustrating. I was wanting a 1, 2, 3, 4, but I did not find that. However, I did look at the order of the Jesuits and several of their features, and so let me just share with you how I understand the Jesuits connect to the military. It seems that the military pattern of the Jesuits included the hierarchy of the order. In other words, they had a very structured hierarchy like the military. At the top is the superior general. He is advised by 4 assistants. Beyond them, he has an advisory council. And then he also has at his side a figure that's known as the admonitor. And this person seems to be a personal confessor, as well as someone who whose position is to advise and counsel and even give correction to this superior general. The order then is divided into geographical regions throughout the world, each one headed by a provincial superior. Then each Jesuit community has a rector and other officers. So we have offices and a hierarchy and a distinct structure. All right, the main documents of the founding Jesuit order are spiritual exercises and the constitutions. And excerpts from these documents are included in your outside reading, or at least your reading from documents of the Christian Church. So you've read those. In these writings, the Jesuits are expected to conquer themselves and to regulate their lives according to the Jesuit order, which is another military quality. Now, the original purpose of the Society of Jesus was to act like soldiers of Christ in taking back the regions that had converted to the Protestant faith. They did not act with force, but they did act with persuasion, and in many instances, they were successful. reestablishing Catholicism in regions that had turned to Protestantism. They are well known for their mission activities, especially in the East, and many are numbered among Christian martyrs. Many died on the mission field, as soldiers die on the battlefield. Now, like any reform movement, the Jesuits often did not stay true to their original calling, but succumbed to the temptations that are inherent in power and wealth. And today, their worldliness of some has made them the subject of jokes, like the ones I told last week, okay? Now, those are exceptions, but at any rate, it just kind of shows you the kinds of stereotypes that are there about Jesuits. On the other hand, there are devout Jesuits who still serve the Catholic Church as soldiers of Jesus. So that's the best that I could come up with on that topic. But anyway, just wanted to pass that along. And anytime someone has a question that I cannot answer, I will try very hard to come back with the correct answer. All right, let's talk about the wars of religion in Europe. The Reformation was needed, and we've discussed the corruption, the errors, the lack of spiritual guidance given in many cases in the Catholic Church, and so we applaud much of what happened in the Reformations, and we appreciate the reformers. But the nature of the Magisterial Reform led to inherent problems. All right, can someone define Magisterial Reform? You see a hand? Magisterial Reform? Whoa, Kurt, give it a shot.
I'll try.
Okay.
We're talking about how the church and the state were connected, and how the church called upon the state to push forth these reforms, or basically enforce them.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the magisterial reform would be how to kind of break away from that, yet also hold the church as high as it should be.
Okay. Let me cut you off there before you wander too far astray, because so far you're correct. And the word magisterial comes from the Latin magister, which means the ruler. And so the magisterial reform is the reform exemplified by what reformers? Come on. Who's the first reformer we looked at? Luther, all right. Who else? Zwingli, all right. Calvin. And then in England, all right. These are all examples of the magisterial reformation. The only reformers we've looked at that separate church and state are the Anabaptists, okay? But the magisterial reform depended on the state to establish and maintain their reform, and so we continue to see a union of church and state even among most of the Protestants. And so when the state stood up to defend its religion, then it was willing to defend it to the point of war, and to defend it with the sword. And so we have Protestants and Catholics going to war with each other in different regions, and then also we're going to talk about the 30 Years' War, which really culminated this period of the wars of religion. So this lecture will simply highlight the geopolitical areas of conflicts, and we'll see how in different places the citizens in that nation would war many times against the monarchy. Many times it was nobility against the monarchy. Many times there were political and economic motivations behind what was being promoted as a religious war. And we're just going to just kind of skim through most of these. For more details, go to Justo Gonzalez. because he's got a nice section on these wars of religion. All right. Another thing that is going on during this, the Magisterial Reformation and during these wars of religion is the fact that in these differing regions we have the rise of nationalism. We talked about that as a motivation for the Reformation in general, but then beyond that we have this this nation building going on, so that we have Luther in Germany, we have the Reformed theologians and pastors of France and Holland and Bohemia. So these are all issues that are going on as well. This, as it says, happened during phase 2 of the Reformation era, the 1560s to the 1650s. Again, thinking about this magisterial reform, thinking about the union of church and state, if it is the responsibility of the government to press reform, it is important who rules the government, whether it's Catholics, Lutherans, or the Reformed. And so these are the ones who are at the forefront of these battles. All right, we're going to begin talking about Scandinavia, and just to say that that we have on the one hand, we have Frederick I, who is going to be who overthrows Christian II. Frederick then becomes the king of Denmark and Norway, and he officially recognized Lutheranism. Now, Christian II still maintained rule over Sweden, and he was opposed by Gustavus Eriksson, became known as Gustavus Vasa, and he led a revolt against Christian II, who then was deposed, and Gustavus encouraged Lutheranism in Sweden. This, of course, is going to become important because in the 30 Years' War, the Scandinavian countries and their armies are going to have a very important role in the 30 Years' War. Now, I just added a map. I don't think this is in your notes, but you'll see a map of Norway and Denmark. Here's Norway, Denmark, Sweden, including Finland, and all of this area by the end of these wars has become Protestant. All right, we've already talked at length about Switzerland, but in 1531 we have the Civil War. It's called the Kappel War, and it was actually during the Second War of Kappel that the Roman Catholic cantons defeated the Protestant cantons, and that was the conflict in which Ulrich Zwingli died. And as a result of that Civil War, we have 5 Swiss cantons that in the south that were Catholic and remain Catholic to this day, but the northern cantons of Switzerland are Reformed. And we're going to see, as we see Europe being divided up, generally speaking, the Protestants are going to settle in the north, and the Catholics are going to remain strong in the south. All right, let's look at the Holy Roman Empire, or Germany. The Lutherans were struggling in the context of a Catholic league led by the Habsburg dynasty, major dynasty of rulers that dominated for centuries. But the Lutherans gathered together in what we call the Schmalkaldic League. They were organized between 1529 and 1546 against the Catholic League. 1532, they came to a stalemate, and so Charles V sued for the Peace of Nuremberg, which prohibited Protestant expansion that allowed them to practice their faith within their own territories. Well, this is all well and good, but in fact it was unenforceable, and the Protestants continued to expand their influence and their territories. So the Catholics then formed the League of Nuremberg to counter the Protestants' advance And then we have a major civil war between Protestants and Catholics beginning in 1546. Now, as you'll see in your textbook, there were four things that were a part of this civil war, and the ultimately led to the victory of Charles V and the Catholics. First was the bigamy of Philip of Hesse. Now, Philip was a significant leader among the Protestants. It was he who asked Luther and Zwingli to meet at Marburg for a colloquy in hopes that there could be a union between the Swiss reformers and the German reformers against the Catholics. As you know, Luther and Zwingli were unable to come to an agreement on one particular doctrine. That's right, the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist. All right, so they could not come to an agreement, and so we did not have this alliance. But Philip of Hesse continued to be a strong figure in the advancement of Protestant interests. Well, Philip was married, but his wife was unable or unwilling to keep up her side of the conjugal agreement. All right, in other words, they did not have sexual interaction with each other. And Philip, having a strong sexual appetite, satisfied it outside of his marriage. And he began to feel guilty about this, and so he could not, did not want to divorce his wife, and so he began to think about taking on a second wife. And he went to Luther for advice, and he mentioned to Luther, oh, look at the Old Testament. They had multiple wives. The patriarchs had multiple wives. Therefore, I should be able to have multiple wives. Luther said no, that's not a good idea. However, he went to Melanchthon, Philip Melanchthon, who was Luther's second in command. He was his associate. Melanchthon was a little bit easier on it, and he actually had written that the New Testament writers praised the Old Testament patriarchs without condemning their polygamy, therefore giving perhaps tacit approval to the idea. And then he went to Martin Bucer, who's the reformer in Strasbourg, and Martin Bucer felt like taking a second wife was better than committing serial adultery. All right? So ultimately, Philip did take on a second wife and was married in a secret ceremony. And so once this was discovered, well, then the Catholics used it to good advantage because those who were following Philip of Hesse in their support of the Protestant interest began to back away and would use that as an excuse not to support the Protestant advance, and would then side with Charles V. So that was one issue that kind of splintered the what otherwise would have been a stronger union of the Protestants. Right, one issue. Second issue was that the Duke of Saxony, Maurice, refused to support the Protestants' military ambitions. He was Protestant, but he was opposed to the rebellion, and so he sided with Charles V, and that was a major blow to the Protestant interests. And then Luther died in 1546, and without Luther's leadership, the Protestants lost one person who could really galvanize support and generate the advance. And then at the same time, Charles V began to settle other wars with France and with the Turks so that he could finally focus his attention on the Protestants. And so all of this came together, and he began to take the war to the Protestants, and he defeated them, and then so we have Roman Catholic dominance in the area. So we have what we call the interim, a period where he gave the Protestants time to return to Roman Catholic practice, but in 1555, they have a counteroffensive, and so it leads again to a stalemate in 1555. And so the result of that is what we call the Peace of Augsburg. It was a truce, it was a compromise, and the principles said that each civil ruler or city council should decide what religion will be in their territory or city. In Latin, cuius regio eius religio. Whoever is the king, that is his religion. Okay? Whoever is king, the region will follow his religion. And so, so it was the religious practice in each territory depended upon the religious practice of the ruler or the city council. Adherents of other religious viewpoints could leave and go to another territory, or they could conform. But it's interesting that only Catholic or Lutheran churches were allowed. There was no place in the Peace of Augsburg for Reformed Christians, and certainly not for Anabaptists. All right, in I don't have the date, I believe it's 1556, Charles V abdicated as emperor and king. Historians believe that he abdicated because he felt like a failure, that he was not able to stop the spread of the Protestant Reformation. So he abdicated, went into a convent. He divided his empire into Spanish lands that he gave to his son Philip II, and Austrian lands were granted to his brother Duke Ferdinand. Essentially, Charles was the last real emperor of the Holy Roman Empire because he broke up the empire. But we do have successors in Austria, Ferdinand I and Maximilian II. We see them from time to time. All right, Ferdinand I and Maximilian II. Here is, again, a little extra map thrown in as a bonus. Here are the lands that were ruled by Philip II, Spain, and then here in the Netherlands, and also here in southern Italy, in Naples. And then over here, Ferdinand had control over Austria, which includes Bohemia and Moravia and so on and so forth. All right, so that's the Holy Roman Empire. Essentially, at the end of this period, it was divided up, but still was dominated by the Catholics, and yet there were Protestants included among the regions in that area. Steve, did you have a question?
Yes. Was there a lot of shifting around? I mean, was there a lot of going from
Was there a lot of immigrating based on religion?
Well, not immigrating. I'm talking about actual rulers, though. Did they move back and forth really? I mean, we talk about England, but individual rulers outside of England shifted back and forth from
So did the rule shifted back and forth based on the rulers of the territories? I don't know of any in these other territories that shifted in the same way that we see Edward VI is Protestant, Mary is Catholic, and Elizabeth is Protestant.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is between the individual rulers, as their lineage came into power, I mean, do we see shifting back and forth as we do in England between Protestant and Roman Catholic?
Well, I think that's, yeah.
So,
no.
No, we don't.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. No, I don't. I don't see any. I haven't really looked for it.
All right.
So this may be another question that I don't know the answer to. But
well, my next question was going to be how do they come into more contact? I mean, because in my mind, I think if you follow whatever your local ruler holds to, I mean, if he's Roman Catholic, is he just going to let Lutheran, pastor chill in his kingdom?
No.
Come and preach to him,
No,
Lutheranism?
I don't.
Of course not.
Yeah, right.
So that's why I was gonna see if there was sort of switching and how it went about, but
Yeah.
if it did.
There's not, if there's any shifting going on from one ruler to the next, from Catholicism to Protestantism, or in reverse to Catholicism, it is not for the sake of conscience. It is for the sake of political power. And we will see, particularly in France, when we get to France, we will see how at least one ruler switches from Protestant to Catholic for the sake of the kingdom. Okay, so no, I'm not familiar with anything going on in these regions like we see in England. But at the same time, we're going to see military control going back and forth between Protestants and Catholics. So in that sense, yes. Okay. All right, Roman Catholic kingdoms of Southern Europe. The Roman Catholics had a stronghold in Spain and Portugal, and then in Italy. Of course, Italy being the seat of papal power, you'd expect Italy to be strongly Catholic. In Spain and Portugal, the same thing. Certainly Ferdinand and Isabella, when they were rulers in Spain, they established the Spanish Inquisition, which pretty much rid Spain of any dissent from Catholicism. And Latin evangelicals and their churches, they had to leave. They moved to Lutheran and Reformed territories in the north. All right, so in Spain we have strong Catholic theology and enforcement. All right, in France we have the Huguenots. The Huguenots were the French-speaking Reformed church followers of Calvin. They organized their first congregation in 1555, which is fairly late considering that Calvin turned to the Reformation viewpoint as early as 1533, 1534. So this is fairly late for a congregation, but they were under tremendous persecution there in France. Now, where do we get the name Huguenots? And that is a mystery that is unknown, but there's a couple of suggestions. One of them is that there was an early leader named Hughes, and so the Huguenots took their name from him. I like this story much better. That there was the spirit of King Huguan, spelled Huguon. King Huguan, his spirit haunted Tours, France, which was a Protestant stronghold, and supposedly his spirit could be detected at the city gates at night. Well, the Protestants held their illegal meetings at night at that gate, and therefore it was said that they were channeling the spirit of King Huguan, and that's how they became known as the Huguenots, or the Huguenots. That's simply myth, but interesting myth. All right, the Huguenot symbol is the 8-pointed cross, which you can see in the border of the PowerPoint. So you see the 4 points of the cross are divided into 2 each. Those 8 points stand for the Beatitudes. Okay, so just a little interesting side point. Well, by the mid-16th century, 20 to 30% of the population in France became Reformed, and a large percentage of those Protestants are nobility, and so they are acting in opposition to the royalty. We already know about Francis I, who persecuted the French reformers back in the time of Calvin. But you may remember also that he had a sister who was Marguerite of Navarre, who was a staunch Calvinist. Navarre is situated between France and Spain. And so Navarre became a refuge for Protestants. Well, Francis I had a son, Henry II, who married Catherine de Medici, and Henry II and Catherine had 3 sons who successively became king after Henry II. And Catherine de Medici was strongly Catholic and had great influence over her sons. Now, her uncles were Pope Leo X and Clement VII. So you can see that, of course, the de Medici family was a powerful Italian family, powerful enough to place 2 of their family members in the papacy, and so she was strongly Catholic. Francis, the first son was Francis II, whom we have talked about before. He married Mary, Queen of Scots. Remember, Mary was married to Francis II before he died, and then she went back to Scotland and became Queen of Scots. And of course, we've already talked about her activity in opposition to the Reformation there. But Francis II died, and so his brother Charles IX became the king, and then Henry III, his other brother, followed, Catherine de Medici being the queen regent. Well, even though the Huguenots had secured the right to worship in 1562, 10 days later, Catholic troops went through Paris on St. Bartholomew's Day, and they massacred 2,000 of the Huguenots. And so that began a civil war between the Catholics and the Huguenots that lasted for 36 years. Now, ultimately, the throne was being fought over by 3 Henrys. First of all, Henry III, whom I've already mentioned, the son of Henry II. And then Henry of Guise led a civil war. He captured Paris and pretended to be the king. He actually had a forged document that showed that he had descended from Charlemagne, but Henry III had Henry of Guise killed. And then we have Henry of Bourbon, or Henry of Navarre. Of course, being raised in Navarre, obviously he came from a Protestant background, but he was willing to convert and to become king. So he said, Paris is worth a mass. So he took Catholic Mass to show his allegiance to the Catholic Church, and so he became the next king, and he became Henry IV. 1598, he issued the Edict of Nantes, which granted religious toleration for Huguenots because it partitioned France into Roman Catholic and Protestant towns and territories, so that essentially gave freedom to the Protestants to worship in those Protestant towns. So again, we had this kind of whoever is the king, whoever is the ruler, whoever is the city council, that city can worship according to that religion. So they did have Protestant cities. But in 1629, all of that went for naught because the royal-backed Catholics attacked the Huguenot cities, and led by the leading political figure, which was the Cardinal Richelieu. Louis XIV issued the Edict of Fontainebleau, which repealed all the rights granted to Huguenots. So Huguenots dispersed to the Netherlands, Germany, British Isles, the Americas, and finally toleration was granted in 1787, just before the French Revolution. Okay. So we have a badly divided France over this issue of Protestantism versus Catholicism. Okay. How many of y'all have ever seen a filmed representation of the Three Musketeers? Okay, Cardinal Richelieu was the bad guy in those movies, at least in the ones that I saw. So anyway, of course, there's a real corny Three Musketeers movie made with Gene Kelly as D'Artagnan. and Vincent Price as Cardinal Richelieu. There's a better one that was made in the 70s with Michael York as D'Artagnan and Charlton Heston as Cardinal Richelieu. If you ever get a chance to see that one, it's excellent. There's actually they actually did it in 3 parts. There's the 3 Musketeers and then the 4 Musketeers, and then there's actually a 3rd movie that I have not seen. But anyway, if you ever have a chance to see them, those are good. Those are good. But we'll move on. That's enough of the movie review. The Netherlands are another important political area that we're going to talk about. And I think, ultimately, I think that I just want to, I'll point out, first of all, that when Philip II became the king over the Netherlands, obviously he was strongly Catholic. His sister Margaret was a regent, and when Protestants threatened, her advisor said, "Do not fear." He said, "Do not fear these beggars." And so beggars became the touchstone of rebellion, and so that's why the Navy is called the Sea Beggars, and the beggar's pouch became the banner of rebellion. But we have this opposition between the Catholics and the Protestants, and ultimately, I'm going to say that in the southern Netherlands, they remained Roman Catholic, and they became Belgium. So Belgium is Catholic. Belgium started out as the southern region of the Netherlands. The northern Netherlands became Reformed, and that became the established church. This is important because when we get to Jacob Arminius and the Remonstrance and the Synod of Dort, we need to understand that the established religion at that time was Calvinism or Reformed theology. All right, that's really all I'm going to say about that. So let's move on and talk about the 30 Years' War. This happened when Catholicism was forcibly reintroduced into Germany, and the Protestants responded by forming an evangelical union, and then, of course, then the Catholics formed their own league. And in 1618, there was a revolt by Bohemian Protestants, and when the Catholics sent their advisors to negotiate, well, the Bohemians just took the advisors and threw them out of the window. Okay? 2 of them just threw them out of the window. This is called the Defenestration of Prague. Defenestration. This is a new word for you, and if you ever throw something out of the window, you can say that is a defenestration, or I'm going to defenestrate this and just throw it out the window. As one of them was falling, he said, "Mary, Mother of God, please defend me." And the Protestants looked out and they saw that both of them survived. And they said, "Well, I guess Mary did defend them." But at the same time, they survived because they fell into a pile of manure, and so not a happy ending for the Catholics. And so the Bohemian Protestants elected Frederick of the Palatinate as king, but they were the Roman Catholic Habsburgs came after them, and the Roman Catholics defeated them in 1625. So this event of throwing the Catholic emissaries out the window, 1618, that began the 30 Years' War. The first battle was won by the Catholics, but the Protestant League, who was led by Denmark, remember we have a strong Protestant state in Scandinavia, and so Denmark united with the North German Lutheran princes. They're battling against the Habsburgs without much success, but then Sweden's king Gustavus Adolphus comes along, and they began to turn the tide for the Protestants until Adolphus's death. Ultimately, we have a stalemate, 1632 to 1648. There's chaos, and finally, the war ends, not because of any military defeat, not because of any diplomatic solution, but because people began to refuse to fight. In 30 years, there were 17 to 18 million casualties. 17 to 18 million casualties, including civilians, women, and children. Okay. Some say that was 50% of the population. So a very devastating war. It is settled by the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. So many historians view 1648 as the conclusion of the Reformation era and as an event leading to the modern era. It provided religious and civil rights for Catholics, Lutherans, and Calvinists. Who's left out? The Anabaptists, right. So finally, Calvinists get their place at the table, but certainly Anabaptists still were persecuted. The ruler or the magistrate determines the region's religion, and the division of the territories were divided up based on the religious lines of 1624. So in the Holy Roman Empire, still we have some regions that are Catholic, some regions that are Protestant. As a result, Western and Central Europe is divided politically, religiously, and culturally. And again, as I said a while ago, the North is generally Protestant and the South is generally Roman Catholic. All right, in the aftermath of the war, principles of toleration that were implied by the Peace of Westphalia did not indicate a deeper understanding of Christian love, but instead it represented a growing indifference to religious matters. People began to ask, is there not a better way for Christians to express themselves than by war? Is not war the antithesis of Jesus' message? And so there was a growing indifference to religion. We see the beginning of the modern secular state, where the state begins to lose its direction from religion and more a direction from secular ideals. There's a doubt in the dogmatic and conflicting statements of orthodoxy by both Catholics and Protestants, and that prepared the way for the skepticism of the age of enlightenment. And so it's important for us to understand these wars of religion and how devastating they were in Europe, so that when we get to, in our next unit, when we get to the age of enlightenment, we'll understand why these thinkers and philosophers began to look for a way of expressing religion that was not dogmatic, that was not based on conflicting interpretations of Scripture, but instead was based on some natural theology or some common denominator of religion. Okay? So, do we have any questions about wars of religion? All right. Not an area that I'm that strong in, but as I say, I direct your attention to the textbook. All right. Well, let's keep moving. Let's